Kia ora tātou, no mahare mai. Welcome along and hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here today as we explore together how financial education will transform Aotearoa New Zealand. I'm Kendall. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Banker, a financial education company based here in New Zealand. And I'm joined by some fantastic panelists today. We're going to introduce them in a little bit, but first a little bit of housekeeping. So really appreciate everyone making the time to come along today. And I would love to know who we've got here. So we've actually got our chat functionality on the right-hand side of your screen. Love for you to say kia ora, hello, talofa, tell me your name and maybe where you're tuning in from around Aotearoa or perhaps further afield. I have a list full of questions for these amazing minds in the room that we've got today, but you can also utilize the chat function to ask party questions of your own. So please don't be shy. Kia ora, Simon from Hastings. Please don't be shy in putting your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll keep an eye out for them and we'll squeeze them into the kōrero as we go, or we might save them to the end. I'll do my best to get them all in there in the hour, but I'm guessing time is going to fly away on us. Lastly, on the housekeeping side of things, we've also got some questions for you. We're going to make the most of this opportunity and pick your brains as well. So we'll be presenting you with 2 poll questions during this session. And if you could just respond to those as quickly as possible, just to make sure that your response is counted in the final result. And then we'll all reflect on the insights that we create collectively. I think that's everything from me for now. So why don't we get into the exciting stuff? Kia ora everyone through the chat. This is awesome. Looks like we're spread all throughout the motu. So very cool. I want to introduce you to the amazing people you can see around me on the screen. So why don't we kick into it? Let's kick off with someone I have had the pleasure of hearing present in person and also reading in our national publications. I feel like it's weekly. Jarrod, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Kia ora. My name's Jarrod Kerr. I'm the Chief Economist of the mighty Kiwi Bank. I've been back in New Zealand now for a few years, and I'm glad to be home. I spent most of my career overseas in Australia and Singapore. But eventually you've just got to come home. And my wife and I made that decision a few years ago that we want to come back. We want to live a Kiwi lifestyle. And it's been fantastic coming home.
That's awesome. And we're all the better off for that decision. So really great to have you here today, Jarrod, and excited to hear your whakaaro, your thoughts. Someone I haven't yet met in person, the only one of the bunch, but I feel like I know you because I've done a little bit of online stalking. Super impressive resume at such a young age. So Bella, would love you to introduce yourself.
Kia ora, Kendall. Ko Bella tuku ingoa no Scotland, oku tipuna, kei te noho o ki Tamaki Makaurau. My name is Bella, and I am the Partnerships Associate at Toitū Tahua, the Centre for Sustainable Finance. So we're a fairly new organisation. We launched in July last year, and we exist to create a more equitable, sustainable and inclusive financial system. So that looks like engaging with a large, growing, I suppose, ecosystem of stakeholders to work on projects that will accelerate our progress towards this better financial system. And it's a pleasure to be here.
What an incredible kaupapa, and yeah, I think we're all the better for having you here as well. You're obviously going to offer a really unique perspective today, Bella. So thank you. I have not only met this person face to face, I've seen him in action doing his thing in the classroom. So Matt, would love for you to introduce yourself.
Kia ora. My name's Matt Benassi, and I am a teacher down here in Christchurch at Cashmere High School. I teach social studies, I teach business studies, I teach entrepreneurship, I teach innovation. And I've been using Banker for a number of years. I've used it at high school, and I've used it at primary school as well. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Matt. And I think that educated perspective is going to be critical today. I have seen from the chat, not only are people from all over the place, we've also got various schools represented here, which is fantastic. So yeah, I'm sure you what you can provide is going to be of major interest to the audience. Last but not least, gosh, must be 5 or 6 years ago that I first met you, Carissa, and I have watched you from afar with admiration since. So it's really nice to have you along today. Over to you for an intro.
Yeah, oh, kia ora, that's very kind. So my name's Carissa Fairbrother. I'm not in the education sector. From a child perspective, I am a financial advisor. So I co-founded a business with my husband, and we help people post-school make educated financial decisions. So my experience comes from what I see on a daily basis, but I'm also the mother of 3 very, one would call spirited children. So I do have a bit of that perspective as well. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to share.
Likewise, fantastic. Thank you, Carissa. So I said it before, but now the proof is definitely out there. We've got some amazing minds in this space today. So I'm not going to waste any more time. We're just going to get stuck into things with our first question. A reminder, your questions are equally as valid as mine. So please, as we go, put them in the chat. If you want to dig into things a little more, if I didn't quite hit the nail, then yeah, follow up with further questions. So to kick things off, holistically, I'm really interested to know, it's quite an easy one to ease into things. What does financial education mean to you? Carissa, maybe given your background and your experience as a parent, I'd love to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah. So financial education to me is the difference from what I see to be a happy life and a really stressful life and stressful decisions. I think when people are financially educated, not only are they nicer to be around, but they're more productive. There are less social issues. They contribute more. They're willing to stand up for others when you can stand on your own 2 feet. So I see it as crucial. And I take my hat off to you, Kendall, for creating Banker, because it's thanks to your organisation that we're not going to have as many issues, hopefully, in the future, because we do have the opportunity to give kids a financial education and set them up. So it's everything. People say talking about money is ghastly, and we're kind of brought up not to talk about it, but it is so important to start the conversations young, in my opinion.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. That completely resonates with me. In so many ways. Look, I've been too eager to jump, and I just need to remind the audience we're about to shoot out a poll to you. So that's going to be coming your way. If you could respond to that, I think it'll tie really nicely into this discussion we're having. Did anyone want to build on Carissa's thoughts? I mean, I heard it's a real enabler and empowerer of not only money stuff, but I guess the way we live and the pathways that open up to us.
Yeah, look, I see financial literacy as a life skill. It really is like learning to swim, and too many Kiwis, drown in their finances. Working for a bank, we're all too aware of the low levels of financial literacy in this country, the inability of Kiwis to use banks and get banks to help. So yes, I agree with your point. I think financial literacy is all about empowering the next generation.
And that focus on the next generation is so interesting. I'm just watching the poll results come through, which I think everyone can see. Let me know in the chat if you can't see those results. It's in the poll tab just next to chats. But we've definitely maybe got a bias sample in the room here, because we're obviously all valuing financial education at a younger age. Matt, did you have any thoughts on sort of what financial education means to you, or any of the thoughts that the other panelists have picked up on?
Yeah, great points by the other panelists, by the way. Fantastic. Yep, I come from a household where money was talked about at the dinner table pretty much every single night. So seeing the fact that other people weren't talking about it was something that blew my mind. But then I did end up seeing people that didn't have any financial education. I was fighting with a friend, and he had just become flush with money, didn't know what to do with it. And it was the first time I actually saw someone freeze their own assets. He literally got a cup, put his money into a cup, filled it with water, and put it in the freezer. just to stop him from spending money. I couldn't believe
That is
it.
a new take
froze
on
his
the
own.
term freezing assets.
Yes.
I love that.
And
It's fascinating. Yeah,
he
those
did it.
windfall situations.
Yep. He had $500
Yeah.
in the freezer that was frozen just to slow down his pace. And I think financial education tells you how to have control over that and how to have that pace and to know that I don't have to, put my money in the freezer. I don't have to freeze my own assets. I have control over it as well.
I love that. Maybe, Matt, we could introduce the banker freezer module expansion in Banker High. I don't know, food for thought. Carissa?
I was just going to say, you reminded me, Matt, thank you. So we all remember when EFTPOS cards first came out, right? People used to walk down the street with them wrapped in tinfoil because they were afraid that their details were going to be stolen, and obviously we've evolved since then, but now you put in your EFTPOS machine and if it doesn't have PayWave and you have to put in a PIN number, you're like, oh, this is going to take me so much time. And I believe exactly what you're saying. We've lost the ability to spend mindfully. Like things have sped up, technology, how we operate. We've stopped thinking about money and we are making those rash decisions. Where 10 years ago, if we'd had to write longhand in a check, we wouldn't have made the same call. But yeah, I love freezing your assets. I've heard about people doing it with their credit cards, but not hard hold cash.
I love it.
Can I jump in?
Please
Kendall?
do, Bella.
Thank you. I was thinking as all three panelists were speaking about how, I suppose a common denominator is when we think about financial education and what it means, it's, I suppose, setting people up for a better future. And that ties into what we think about the centre and how we can create a better future. So the idea that financial education means that every time you spend your dollar, you're aware of the impact that it will have on your future self, on future generations, but also the planet. So a long-term view of like how you're spending it mindfully, responsibly, consciously, not just for yourself, but for the world around you. And I think up and coming out, our next generation will have, I think, a lot more of a grasp on that and a bigger understanding as to what kind of impact each time we spend has on the world around us.
That's an awesome vision for the future and one I fully subscribe to, and I'm trying to, as everyone in this panel is, and I'm sure the audience are trying to build that future, right? I'm going to move us along here, but I am keen to know if financial education means something different to you and you're in the audience. Throw it in the chat. Keen to explore that. And I also see that someone messed up their vote. Don't worry. I think we've got a clear outlier here. If we reflect on the poll, majority of our respondents see financial literacy as an early stage investment, and research will sort of align with this. Research would indicate that some of your key financial behaviours are sort of formed up and solidified in that 5 to 7 age band, and financial behaviours sort of the tough ones to move. It's like if you've got a coffee habit, or not that there's anything wrong with coffee, but some of those ingrained behaviors, they're the harder things to shift. So it needs to be age and stage appropriate, and we might touch on that sort of stuff later, so I won't dive into it, but absolutely. For those who answered 14 to 16, I do think there's definite validity in going deeper and engaging more practically with financial literacy at that age. Obviously there we're exploring purchases. It may be the first car, so that can be a really material moment in financial literacy, the financial literacy span for a rangatahi. Any thoughts on that poll before I move us along, panel? Cool, we'll keep trucking. Look, I'm really enjoyed this discussion so far, and it's awesome to see the sort of hive mind working here. But my second question is maybe not so hopeful. I want a little bit of understanding around what you see as some of the adverse or negative social outcomes from a lack of financial literacy or lower financial capability. So maybe, Matt, let's kick off with you. What do you see? It may be evidence-based, or it just may be anecdotal.
Yeah, well, I really see if you don't have the financial education you need as an adult, and if you don't develop that at a young age and you're not developing those habits, that I really think that if you're making poor financial literacy decisions or poor financial decisions, they can take a long time to recover from. So it's having that information, it's having those skills, and it's having that ability to make those good decisions before you have to recover from them. And I think it's just giving the students and it's giving young adults the control in order to go, maybe I need to step back before I sign on the dotted line here.
It's so true, that preventative measure, right? Jarrod, from your perspective, do you have any talking points around some of those adverse outcomes?
Oh, look, yes, I think widening inequality is a problem. It is a problem that we're facing. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And I think financial literacy is a big part of that. When we look at our economy, I think we could be doing a lot better. I think people could be a lot smarter and confident in what they do. It disgusts me that, predatory lending is a thing in New Zealand, focusing on the poor. It's something we need to break, something we need to break out of. It's all about, enhancing people's, financial security, getting people better prepared for the future. So, yeah, look, I think one of our biggest problems, which is widening inequality, is largely due to a lack of financial literacy.
That's really interesting. Bella, given the work you do, I'm sure you might have some perspectives around this question as well.
So valid what the previous panelists have shared, and I suppose to build on that, there's potential for those kind of, again, taking a long-term view, adverse outcomes, like not enough savings for retirement, not enough money management to be able to provide for your family, put food on the table, make ends meet, and kind of those, I suppose, day-to-day problems that families are facing every day with financial hardship. I suppose the main negative outcomes of low financial literacy, but equally the problem of things like buy now, pay later, which I've seen in my generation particularly become accustomed to using and not quite understanding what things like credit scores are, or how to responsibly not use platforms like that. So yeah, there's so many adverse outcomes, but we can kind of only touch on a couple at this time.
Totally. Carissa, any thoughts?
I've got so many. Like, this is my jam, because I see people post-education, sort of probably, to be honest, maybe 30 plus, when people have got their houses, and the amount of times I've heard, really? Like, I see people, and I deal with a lot of smart people, and I'm not being mean to them, but they don't know how to use credit cards, or they don't really have an understanding of compound interest. And we live in this society, and it goes back to that slow fasting. Delayed gratification is a thing of the past now with these predatory lenders, payday services, all of those sorts of things. You don't have to wait. No longer is the lay-by, you have to pay it off and then get your goods. We don't build up to anything anymore. And so I think if we continue, that's a fundamental part of financial education to me for the future, is teaching delayed gratification and the consequences of it. Because the average Kiwi still really hasn't grasped it.
I totally agree.
I think that's a story.
Yeah, it's a frustrating one, isn't it? Because we've got these organizations with hundreds of millions of dollars pushing consumption pressures on us that build into societal pressures with social media. So it's just this, this real dynamic situation. I see in the chat, Janet's put modelling behaviour, and look, I think there needs to be strong modelling from adults as well, but also building these behaviours in our rangatahi, so that's the normal for them, and they have more resilience as they navigate innovation.
Can I just interrupt there? Like Matt said, he grew up at the dinner table talking about money, right? But so, like, there's a generation, and Bella, you make me so hopeful and for the future. Like, every word that falls from your mouth, I'm like, yes. But there is a generation, which I'm in the middle of, our mid-40s, and we didn't really get taught the basics at school. And now we have money, and recently there have been, these huge gains in the property market. So there's a lot of people feeling wealthy and spending more than they can afford because we didn't get the basics young enough. We didn't get the opportunity to create this long-term outlook or get those financial habits. So unfortunately, I think more needs to be done at school, because I don't think parents in my generation, not all of them, I'm not blaming all of them, but they're not all experts. They don't know because they didn't get taught.
It's that intergenerational.
So you can't expect the generation to be taught to teach.
I totally agree. Hey, we've had a couple of really great questions come through the chat, and I want to see if the panelists want to speak to any of those, or I can jump in as well. The first one's from Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. The wealth gap between men and women at retirement is quite vast, and I have read a bit about this recently. Jarrod, I don't know if KiwiBank was involved in some research. I could be wrong. The question is, what ideas do you have to how this can be corrected? Or perhaps if we can't solution for it today, what are some of your thoughts around those root causes? Does anyone have any immediate thoughts jumping out at them at that? From my perspective,
I can jump in, Kendall.
Oh, go for it, Bella, please.
I suppose initially thought of, the maternity wealth gap, which sees women come out of the workforce. They don't keep contributing to their KiwiSaver, and at that time they don't may not see it as a priority. So they're still young enough. Retirement still seems far away enough that it's not a major concern for them. And so, of course, as men stay in the workforce, continue to contribute to it, that kind of sees that gap widen. I suppose I'd be interested to see what solutions are out there for addressing that. But it is, such a big issue for us and our gender and how we are facing retirement.
Certainly think that is a root cause contributor, and as a society we change what modern roles look like, I'm quite hopeful that we may see some change in that way. A couple of friends of mine had a baby recently, and actually the father's taking paternity leave up front and the mother will later. So I'm hoping we see some shifting dynamics there, but that's big generational cultural change, right? The other feeder into it that I think is a lever we've got a little more movement on is actually pay equity. And we're seeing this conversation come through stronger recently. I'm not sure if the organisations anyone works at have been doing any research or have any insights around that and what they're investing in closing that sort of pay equity gap.
Sorry, no to that part of the question, but I think it comes back to financial education, the things that you were talking about, Bella. When people are on maternity leave, they're not aware that potentially there is disposable income in the household and they could be topping up their KiwiSaver. There's all those little education points which are not being communicated. So there are little things that can be done. But yeah, I think it's a whole another webinar to talk about the equity pay gap, because we could be here for a while.
Totally agree.
We'll
get you back, don't worry. And Chloe, just your question about financial literacy and how New Zealand compares. We're kind of above average, but I take a bit of issue with being above average because I think globally we're still not performing well. So it's almost like we're running a 100-meter race and it's taking us all 30 minutes and we're celebrating because we got second. That's still not that great of an achievement. So yeah, I kind of like to look at the real data there, just so we're not falsely reassuring ourselves. But look, just coming back to our questions, we've sort of taken a bit of a negative or pessimistic view about the current state and some of the impacts that can have for us individually and societally. But I want to flip that coin and look at what are some of the social or economic transformations, some of those opportunities that New Zealand could see in the next 5, 10 or 20 years through improved financial literacy and capability. What are the possibilities that financial literacy and capability can provide the future of Aotearoa? And I guess this is taking a bit of a macro view. So Jarrod, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, look, I think empowering Kiwis with financial literacy will lead to a much better outcomes. A higher quality of living, higher quality of life. Quite simply, greater financial literacy will mean that we will have stronger household balance sheets. We'll have more financial security, higher levels of savings, which I think is critical. We'll also have better run businesses. So particularly small businesses, right? If they're keeping an eye on their costs and they're learning ways to grow, financial literacy is key to running a good business. For me, the longer term challenge for New Zealand, I think our greatest challenge that we faced is an aging population and how we fund that. So financial literacy is key to getting people saving early for retirement. We simply have to save more for retirement. And the best way to do that is to start early. Go hard, go early. And the earlier you start in the KiwiSaver and other schemes, the larger your retirement fund is going to be. And we're going to have a situation, I think, in coming years where retirement age is going to be lifted. It has to be mathematically. And if you want to get into a retirement under the age of 70, which is what I'm thinking retirement age will be when I get there, I'm going to have a much larger retirement fund than what I've currently got. This is for everyone to consider. People are living a lot longer. You're living for 20 years in retirement, right, these days. That's a lot of money you need.
That's so true. Carissa, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, 100% with Jarrod. Retirement should be like the 20-year holiday we're all working towards, that we get to enjoy. For me, and what I see is Kiwis fundamentally can't look long-term. From my experience working with clients. And when we sit down with people, the first things that we're talking about from a financial advice point of view is saying, tell us your short-term goals, what are your medium-term goals, and what are your long-term goals? And retirement definitely fits into that long-term goal. But by the time people come to see us, the mid-50s, they all always say, God, I wish I'd come sooner, or they do leave it too late. So if we had the benefit, is all of those things that you're saying, but I also think this could severely impact New Zealand's suicide rate, mental health, because money stress and not having enough of it and overcommitting yourself and not being able to make good decisions, for many people, it's the end of the road sort of stuff. So I would love to believe that if we were better at financial literacy, the long-term benefit is the mental health of our nation.
You raise a really good point. Sometimes we can think of money in isolation. It just is in our app or in our wallet. But actually, it's a thread that weaves its way throughout our whole life and every stage we face and into our well-being in many different shapes or forms. So really valid. Bella, interested to hear your perspective on this question.
Thanks, Kendall. As the previous two panelists were speaking, I was thinking about the fact that, when we have our own kind of house in order, our finances in order, or can manage our money, we are potentially able to better participate in society. So that looks like, seeing more young people exercise their right to vote, to get engaged in political debates. And if they have, a better understanding of their own personal financial situation, they may have the capacity, both mentally, I suppose, emotionally, spiritually, to engage in economic discussions and understand more macroeconomic issues that affect them in the long run. So I suppose I see it as a really big opportunity to get more young people, our rangatahi, even tamariki, involved in those high-level discussions that affect the nation. And the potential for that is to see more communities benefit and have political decisions made that serve them in a broader sense.
Oh, that sounds like a platform shift. That's pretty transformational. I love it. Hey, Matt, any closing thoughts before we move on to the next question?
Oh, I did like the rebranding of retirement to the 20-year vacation. I thought that was amazing. If we think about it that way, you start to think, hey, I usually go on a holiday for a week. I got 20 years of this. This is awesome. I got the time. I just need the money now.
That's right.
When you relate that to You relate that back to people that do really well sometimes in the stock market. They're the ones that forgot they invested because they haven't done anything with it, and it's grown so much because they haven't touched it. So sometimes that's the best approach. And I think, maybe rebranding retirement to the 20-year holiday is maybe a good way to do it.
I'll take it.
Sold.
I love it.
Well, it's relatable, isn't it? And finances has to be, and financial education has to be relatable. So you're onto a winner there, Carissa. I love it. Look, we've got another poll coming up for our audience, so keep an eye out for that. It should be coming through now. But also keep your questions, your partai coming through, or just your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you're thinking of our kōrero. If you disagree, if you agree, we're open to hearing anything. But while you're answering that poll, I am going to pose my next question to our panel members. I'm keen to know what financial capabilities do our rangatahi, our young people need before they leave school? So what are those key financial skills that we want to be developing in them? And I don't want to offend any of the other panelists, but I do believe Bella was the most recent school leaver here. So Bella, I might get your thoughts first.
Correct. And yeah, I suppose there's those basic capabilities needed, like managing your money, and I'm just looking at the poll, which has career planning, investments, budgeting, banking, all those really important things. And I would add to that that a key capability would be that understanding of how our money is a vote for the kind of future that we want to see, both for ourselves and for the world around us. So it kind of comes back to what I mentioned at the start of the session around having, I suppose, a philosophical understanding of the fact that our money is kind of a transaction of not only, physical cash or using an FPOS card. It's also an energy transaction. It's a moral and an ethical transaction of what we want to see in the world, what we actually want to invest in, and what we care about. And I suppose that's potentially harder to teach in schools because it's kind of more philosophical, but it feels like a really important place for people to start on their money journey and their understanding of their own relationship with money.
How about that framing? I love that. It's so powerful when you phrase it like that. I'd heard previously that money is a magnifying glass on our existing values and behaviors, which I kind of liked, but I think the way you phrase it's so much more eloquent and relatable. And I see in the chat, Peter, I totally agree with that. That financial stability, that grounding, it is a way to empower our well-being. I think everything prospers once we've got that strong foundation in base. So agree. But back to the current partai, Carissa, I'm keen to get your take on it. What are those key capabilities?
Oh, I just love Bella.
Don't we?
Honestly, it's like financial poetry. Love it. And so as you were talking, and then you stole my thunder, Kendall, you don't know it yet, but it is values-based, isn't it? But you don't know your values, or you don't know how to articulate it if you don't have the knowledge. Knowledge is key here. So making sure that the tamariki are getting not to be able to aim high and to know that their money can go wherever they want to go, I think it's really important. Popping the bubble, lifting the glass ceiling, and giving people, empowering people to make their own decisions and make educated decisions is so key. But again, it comes back to a couple of skills that I see missing in adults is the ability to articulate that and their goals. I think that we need students leaving school knowing what they want. And if they don't know what they want, knowing the pathway to form a decision, I think that's really important.
Just so right. And I think a lot of the audience would agree with you there. See budgeting coming in strong. And often budgeting is associated with goal setting. Matt, I don't know if when you teach budgeting aspects, are goals interwoven into that?
I think they have to be. I would say that budgeting for me is number one. You need to know what's coming in. You need to know what's going out. You need to know what's left. You need to know what you're aiming for. And if something goes wrong, do you have enough to cover it? So I think for me, the one skill that I would go, what we need is we definitely need budgeting. And then once you look at that budget, think, can we do better, right? I came across lazy tax, and just the fact that, you're not looking for a better deal. So the fact that, your time isn't worth it. Whereas, your bank account doesn't care if you earn that $20 or if you save that $20, does it? So, I mean, you can spend your time either earning money or you can spend your time saving money at the same point. But yeah, we actually do teach budgeting. We look at planning a holiday. Kids got to, plan a holiday for a family of 4. They got $10,000 and that's it, Some of them go over. Some of them start thinking that $10,000 will get them a week in the fanciest hotels in Dubai, and then, some are going camping.
Love that. Your personality starts to come through, doesn't it? Lazy tax, it's a good one. Hey, and what does the chief economist tell us?
I agree with the poll and what the others have said around budgeting, but I would also give investments and risk management a bit of a nudge as well. The better we can think about investment from a long-term perspective, I think is important. And risk management, what happens if I lose my job? What happens if my house gets flooded? Do I have insurance? There's all sorts of other skills that we need as well. And I think investing in risk management should also get a bit of a plug here.
We were probably a little cruel. I think we only let them pick one. So you're completely right. And I think in this evolving, with Te Tai, our environment evolving as well, risks are only increasing. Josh, I actually totally agree with you. We probably omitted a couple of good ones on the list, didn't we? Like understanding credit, and increasingly like all forms of credit. We talked about buy now, pay later, and interest and compound interest. Yeah, I mean, interest is obviously a talking point at the moment, but compounding interest, but the eighth wonder of the world, right? So
the magic of it. The magic.
That's right. Cool. Okay, so I think the poll's pretty conclusive, but as we've sort of heard, it's kind of a package deal, and you kind of need a collection of skills. You need your toolbox, and you need to be able to build on that progressively as you enter the financial world, and your life stages require you to pull out different tools from that toolbox. So thank you, audience, for your participation. My next question is a pretty practical one, and I'm keen to know what resources each of you would recommend for educators specifically, and actually anyone, throw parents in there too. We've probably got an eclectic audience, to help their young ones, their loved ones, their students develop their financial literacy and financial capability. Look, I'm not just pushing for banker plugs, so please feel free to share any resources but I am going to throw, as the educator in the room, Matt, I'm going to start by throwing to you.
Yeah, I do really think that just knowing, something about financial education isn't enough. It's not necessarily going to change behavior. You need more than that. You need to put it into an application where you're actually tested, and then use that and give yourself a problem and see what you can do around that. So a banker does that, and it does it well. I mean, I can give kids and I can teach them about compound interest. Doesn't mean they're going to go and put their money in the savings account and not touch it or put it in there for 20 years. It's a matter of actually, what do we need to do to change behavior, and what resource can we use in order to do that? Now, banker's a really good one to do that, because it prompts you in order to establish a behavior that you can use later in life, or you can use right now with your own finances. So yeah, yes, you need the education, but you need something that's going to trigger the behavior at the same point.
Yeah, look, I'm biased, Matt, so I agree with you. I think it's great. I'm wondering, we do have a question in the chat focusing on advice for parents around supporting and nurturing financial literacy in their kids. So yeah, Carissa, jump in, please.
Yeah. So two things, I'd say it's the language you use at home, but we also use an app with our kids that we've recently transferred to, and it's called Square One. And it's and when my kids first bought it home, well, when we started using it, they actually said, "Oh, this is like banker at school." So it kind of works similar. So it's pocket money application, basically, where the kids get paid, but they get their own debit card, and if they swipe left, there's a list of jobs that they have to do that they get paid for, which as a parent I approve, and then if they swipe right, they can set up really cool images of their savings goals. So it's a way for when I'm at the netball courts and one child says, "Mum, I want a hot chocolate," I go, "Sure, here. Do you want to spend your own money?" And so they're getting the value lesson early on. We also talk about tax in our household. So whenever the kids get an ice cream, for example, we go, right, tax time, and I get a massive lick, because anything good in life, you have to give a portion of it back. So tax is a concept that we've implemented really early on. But I think it's just being free with conversation and saying no at home. Just because you can doesn't mean you should spoil your children. I think saying no and teaching that delayed gratification, even if you're not so good at it yourself, that's something you need to embrace and pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Anyone else got any resources or hot tips for educators or parents alike? Cool. I think we've covered some really good ones. Obviously bankers out there, but anything that can bridge us into the real financial world, like Square One, is fantastic as well. Financial education, I believe in financial education first finances. And so I feel like just getting that timing right, having a really strong lines of communication at home, and then building those bridges into the real financial world with trusted products, like a lot of the solutions KiwiBank provides, or Square One that we've talked about, is definitely what I'd advocate for. Yeah.
Can I just give Banker a plug though, because not all parents are like probably the people in this chat room, and I've heard you say this before. So if you're dealing with a school that hasn't got Banker, just remember that might be their only avenue to financial education, because they're not getting the language or the Square One or those things at home. So if your kids are doing okay, that's all right. But think about the other kids as well, because we actually need to lift everyone up, not just your own.
Yeah, we were really intentional about where we housed Banker. We see schools as an equaliser. Every kid that walks through the gate has the right to financial education. So yeah, it's a really good point. I see in the chat we've got some other recommendations. Scott Pape, Barefoot Investor, I agree. It's a good read. It's quite accessible. And we've got Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. Have not checked it out, so thank you very much. We'll look into that. My next question, I think I'm keen to get into, what are some of the challenges, and we've kind of touched on some of these. I think we've talked about behaviours, we've talked about consumption pressures and marketing, but yeah, if we just spend a little bit of time looking at what some of the challenges our kids experience when it comes to learning money, what jumps to mind?
Kendall, I can jump in.
Great.
I was thinking about the potential for children to inherit their money stories from their parents, or other, I suppose, role models around them. So I suppose potential for when they are learning about money or budgeting or spending and saving is to, really fall into the same potential money stories or situations that they've seen growing up. And that could be, I suppose, a risk or a barrier to, what they want to achieve or what they feel is possible for them.
It's so true. I think it's that learning by osmosis and observance. It's not explicit, but it lives within us, that intergenerational experience. Love that. Does anyone have any stories? Like, obviously got some pretty switched on people in the room, but like, where did you guys learn about money? Was it parents? Was it DIY?
So yeah, I mean, my conversation was at home around parents, and it was driven by my dad. But my dad was very he wanted to decrease costs and wanted to find the best deal you possibly could. And that wasn't always value. And then when I remember coming across something that Terry Pratchett wrote, and he was talking about space boots or something. And basically someone that could afford 600 pair of boots could, but they would last a lifetime. However, those that couldn't had to go buy new boots every single year that cost $50. And over a lifetime, they're spending more than $600. And I think that analogy really tips on value and gender gap and the ability to have that value that goes along with it. So I think that was a really powerful message.
Yeah, I agree. Any other challenges that come to mind for our rangatahi?
Yeah, can I tip in? And I think I've heard you speak about this, Kendall. For me, as a qualified advisor, we go through education to get our qualifications. We're heavily regulated, and then you have TikTok,
with influencers,
where if you rub a car the right way, or everyone's suddenly a millionaire, and money talk videos, and it scares me as a parent, but also as a professional advisor, that the advice that our kids are getting outside of the traditional education system isn't qualified. Not all of it, and not regulated, and that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it is concerning. It's like that same analogy that no one advertises apples, but McDonald's is pumping billions of dollars into marketing. It is concerning. I was really pleased to see the other day that I think there was some regulation of influencers in Australia. So hopefully globally we can shake these things out, but we're never ahead of the curve, are we? There's always a lag, and a lot of damage can be done in that time. Will, we've had a question from you via the chat. Young adults are often looking for any way to get rich quick. Certainly some of them are. How is the modern financial literacy conversation addressing NFT, cryptos, probably DeFi generally, and other recent high visibility schemes they may see on social media? I think this is a great question because often schemes like this can affect our marginalized and most vulnerable communities. So I think it's, anyone have any thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'm happy to jump in. Yeah. So I think for me, financial education has to keep evolving with the times. It's not static. And I think we might dive into it with the next question. So let's see if we can shake it out a little bit there. Otherwise, we will address that question. So my actually last question for you panelists, so please do feel like you can indulge, is what changes do we need to make in our approach to financial education due to the intangible digital nature of money today? And if I tack onto the end, the sophisticated nature of a lot of our financial products. Any thoughts there? Like as we go to PayWave, we've lost coins completely, we've lost notes. How do we ensure our education keeps pace?
I think it ties into one of the questions here. How do we make financial literacy sexy like TikTok? It's the same thing, isn't it? It's like, how do we engage, because we have lost the physical touch of it. Money has become transactional. So I kind of want to ask Bella what she thinks, because she made a really good point before about, an ideal world, and the generation coming through, every transaction is a transaction of energy, and it's a transaction of knowing where you want to spend. So, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, it's a
financial.
It's a really good partai, and I suppose Kendall, when you speak to the evolving nature of financial literacy and capability building, it resonates because it feels like, as individuals have more access to different financial institutions and services and products, we need to keep, not only giving them financial literacy, but legal literacy, and having that baseline understanding of when you're signing up for something, when you're committing to something, how does that interact with your financial situation? So it feels like there needs to be like a woven, I suppose, approach to financial literacy going forward, but also safety online, and looking out for scams, looking out for potential risk involved with online banking and all sorts. And Jarrod, you'll probably know about a lot about that through Kiwi Bank and the high levels of safety needed to share with your customers. But I suppose there's just so many, I suppose, dynamic factors playing into the way people interact with money these days, that it feels like such a evolving space. And it needs to, the literacy modules and things like that need to keep keeping up with that.
It's a really good point. We've started to touch on things like crypto and NFT in our platform. It's a little bit delicate as these things emerge, but I do think you're right, Bella. I think that we need to ensure we're evolving at the same pace as our financial system. And we don't want to only build technical financial capability and literacy. We actually want that rounded ability. So when students are presented with a new financial product or solution, they can look for those red flags because we've actually built that capability in them, not just, what compound interest is, right? I see a few people popping off. That's absolutely fine. Really appreciate your time. And I think this will be sent out once we're wrapped up anyway. So if you missed something great at the end, don't worry, you can catch up. Any other thoughts on this part?
I'll just say I agree with what everyone else has said. The world we live in is getting faster and faster and more online, and we're getting online currencies and very exciting products coming through. As a bank, we're looking at getting faster and making things more accessible. It's obviously a lot easier today to have a bank account and a savings account or a mortgage or a loan than it was 100 years ago, and it's only going to get easier. But as mentioned, the dangers are also growing and becoming more sophisticated. Identity theft and people stealing your credit card details through various channels. So it's about gaining education, gaining confidence around your finances and use of financial tools and banks, but also being very mindful that there are predators out there, and they're becoming more sophisticated the more sophisticated the technology becomes.
Matt, I kind of feel like I want to close with you. You're the educator in the room. Any closing thoughts? It doesn't have to be on this specific question, although I would love to hear your thoughts on the evolution of financial education. But yeah, anything on top of your head?
Yeah, just with the changing nature of it, we are now getting ads, and we now know about products that we are more likely to use more than ever before, because they are more targeted, they are more directed, and the opportunities to spend our money has never been greater or easier. So we are dealing with temptation, and with that temptation, we're actually fighting biology. We need this. Someone's telling me I need this. And how easy is it to spend that money? All I got to do is click, click. Oh, geez, I just spent how much money? There's no friction there to slow it down. And sometimes we used to have that friction. We'd have a queue, we'd have a moment. That buyer's remorse. Well, we could prevent that. We could have buyer's preventative remorse and go, actually, how would I think about this after I bought this? You have that little bit of time. So building in a little bit of friction. And I went, imagine if you built in numeracy into financial education, whereas to actually spend something, you had to, instead of answer the fact that you weren't a robot, you had to prove that you were human. Can you actually, figure out what 7 times 7 times 7 is? That's going to slow your brain down. It's going to ask you, can you actually answer this question, and do you want to purchase this? Because the information, I think, is just it's really strong. So I think we got to build in some strategies in order to slow this down and to think about, right, this money that I've earned, that was hard to earn. How quickly do I want to let go of it, or where do I want to put it?
It's so true, and an awesome way to close this webinar, I think. Because the hours just melted away. I knew it would. With the people on this panel, it was inevitable. But we've covered some awesome territory. I was scribbling down notes as we went. We had some great quotes, I think. And these aren't verbatim, but Jarrod, I really liked you talking about how we drown in our finances. That really resonated with me. It's quite visual, isn't it? And then obviously we were talking about freezing our assets, literally, which is a bit of fun. We got into some heavier stuff as well, though. We talked about increasing inequality, the realities of an aging population, how we're going to have to see transformation in that space, and we're going to need to maybe reframe it, Carissa, as the 20-year vacation, right? How do you save for a 20-year vacation? Good question. Go and talk to Carissa, I'm guessing. And then Bella, I think you had us all in the palm of your hand when we started talking about money as a vote for the future. I'm probably going to claim that and spout that off elsewhere. I will attribute it, don't worry. I liked the idea of lazy tax. Financial friction, I love that notion. How can we build in financial friction into our financial systems, which fundamentally I think a lot of innovators are trying to do the opposite. What is healthy financial friction? But ultimately, I think we all just want to make financial literacy sexy, right? Is that the key takeaway from today? I'm not sure. So a lot of good stuff in this last hour we've spent together. So thank you so much. Look, as a small thank you to the audience for tuning in, we've got a wee koha for you. We've got some resources that we're going to send out. They're specifically, there's a bunch of them. There's one for parents, a couple for our high school educators watching, and some for our primary school educators watching. So they should be popping up in the handout section. Feel free to download them now. We may also send them out via email, but I'd download them now just to be safe. And look, everything we've traversed here is right at the heart of what Banker is and why we do what we do. As I touched on before, we believe that every child has the right to a quality, engaging, effective financial education. And that's how we build our technology with that in mind. So thank you for being a little part of what we do today. And we hope to see you in the future at more events that we're planning to hold as well. And look, if you want to know any more about Banker, how you can get it for your school, or how you can access some of our at-home resources as well, just head over to www.banker.co. We did spell Banker about as hard as you can get it, but you're a smart bunch, so you'll find your way there. Or if you just want to chat to us, we're a small team and we would be very happy to connect with you. But of course, I cannot leave without thanking my fantastic panelists. So, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, ngā mihi whakapetai hoki, mō tō whakaaro, mō tō kōrero, mō tō wā, kia mātou. Thank you all for your thoughts, your insights, and of course, your time with us today. We really appreciate it. And lastly, they're probably going to kill me, but I just got to show up today and have an awesome chat. There's actually a couple of people on the Banker team that did all the hard work. So, Alex, come and say hi, and Chris, come on round. Alex has been communicating with you all, and Chris has been setting everything up as well. And these are a couple of the faces that we'll connect you with if you are interested in learning more. So that's it from us today. We'll wrap up there. Have a great day. Thanks, team.
Kia ora.